Good evening. I got to get my music playlist figured out there so it doesn't do that. Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Random Cast. My name is Timothy Barrett, and this is uh, our Friday live stream. I think I can do that. Whoops. No, stop. That's what I get for live trying to figure out my playlist there. Anyway, welcome to another Random Cast. It's Friday, January 16, 2026, which I never thought I'd be saying during my lifetime, but here I am saying it, 2026. Um, hope you've had a good week. This is the conclusion of the week. If you're watching this live, I guess it could be the conclusion of the week, even if you're not watching it live. But if you're not watching it live, you may be watching it at a different time during the week. So it's whatever it is during the week when you watch it. But hopefully, if you are watching either live or at some later time, you'll do two things. One, you'll check out Bradford Christian College, whether for yourself or someone else. Go to bradfordchristiancollege.com and see what it is that they offer: a number of bachelor's degrees, a Master of Arts in Theological Studies, a mentorship program where you have someone who walks with you through your whole program and keeps you on track, keeps you challenged, helps answer questions, um, and just walks you through so that you can complete your program. Um, Contact Bradford Christian College, ask questions, see if it's not the right fit for you or someone you know. And then the second thing is, I guess I need to be much more aggressive about that. I don't know. But the second thing is, if you're here or watching the video and I happen to say something that is encouraging, helpful, enlightening, hit the like button. I guess that helps if we have viewers hitting the like button. And also subscribe to the channel and then figure out a way to share the video, right? Share a link on your Facebook page, on X, your different social media. See if we can draw others in, and hopefully there's at least a minute or so of what we do that's you find of real value, and right. So when you share it, go ahead and make reference to if you want to share any of our videos and you would say, hey, fast forward to the 23-minute mark and it's really interesting, the discussion or what was brought up at that point. That's great. Whatever sharing, whatever way can help people be brought to our videos, right? And when we do an hour and 20-minute video and you share that with somebody, well, good grief, I don't want to watch an hour and 20 minutes. I get it, right? But maybe if you realize that, oh, hey, my friend was asking about that issue just the other day that they talked about at the 33-minute mark. Sorry for using the number 33 if you're in conspiracy theories. That was just a slip of the tongue. But anyway, if you're at the, share it at that mark and just tell them, hey, listen for 5 minutes, listen for 10 minutes here. They're talking about what you were asking about, and this might help you, that sort of thing. And that's a way to share and not leave others feel like they're obligated to have to listen to all 60 minutes or however long the video is. So do those two things for us, and that can help spread the word. Okay, so with Randomcast, I randomly pick some articles or topics, and they can be from all categories, any category. And we look at those and we try to think about them in a Christian way, right? I try to make this kind of practical Christianity. Let's deal with a news story or a news item or what have you, and a video, and let's respond. And respond hopefully in from a Christian mindset to this. And so tonight I want to start with an editorial that appeared in the Idaho Statesman newspaper. This editorial, let's see, this is not, why am I not? There we go. What's happening? I was trying to zoom in on this and it wasn't. All right. So this is an article written by Kelsey Sagrero. Apologize, Kelsey. I'm sure I didn't pronounce that correctly. This was January 15, which is yesterday. Um, Now, Kelsey, if we scroll here to the bottom of this article, um, she was born in Boise, raised in the Treasure Valley. She's a graduate of the University of Idaho and Portland State University. So that's a little bit about Kelsey. All right, let's take a look at this article, see what we can learn. Because the guest opinion, I should say. Watching humanity go down the drain at Idaho's firing squad facility. All right, so you may or may not be aware of what has taken place. Okay, I'm missing my keyboard. You may or may not be aware of what's happening in the state of Idaho regarding firing squad. So I'm asking AI here for a quick summary of Idaho's firing squad decision. This was a decision made, I believe, during the so-called COVID years when there was concern about supply of the necessary chemicals for death by injection. So in 2023, it says here, Idaho passed a law allowing fire squads as backup option if lethal injection drugs weren't available. Um, the push intensified after a botched legal injection attempt on death row inmate Thomas Creech in Feb 2024. Execution team members couldn't establish a viable IV line after multiple attempts, halting the process and highlighting practical issues with lethal injection. In Feb 2025, a bill was introduced to elevate the firing squad to the primary execution method. Lethal injection is the fallback. The bill passed. The governor signed it into law March 12, 2025. On March 7, 2025, South Carolina conducted the nation's first firing squad execution in over a decade. The Idaho Department of Correction must develop firing squad procedures, potentially including a mechanized or remote operated weapon system to reduce human involvement, electronic triggering instead of volunteers pulling triggers. A 2022 secrecy law protects the identities and qualifications of execution team members. All right, so that's a little bit about the history of how we ended up at this point. And now, apparently, a firing squad facility is needing to be built. And I think from the headline, we can see that Kelsey has a particular opinion about the Idaho firing squad facility. Watching humanity go down the drain at Idaho's firing squad facility. And here's what she writes. Now is a puzzling time to be a freshly graduated architecture student in the state of Idaho. As I prepare to earn my license, I am alarmed by what I am seeing real time here in Idaho. It is disheartening to see my profession, which should uplift the public good, venture down the alley of state-sanctioned violence on more than one occasion. All right, so I guess she feels like she can speak to this issue of the building of the firing squad facility, being an architecture graduate. And right, so she's part of that profession. And notice her words here. She's alarmed, she's disheartened. Now, I don't disagree. I mean, my guess would be, it'd be kind of weird if the architecture profession adopted some other um, goal than to be uplifting to the public good, right? I mean, I would say generally that's what we want buildings, particularly public buildings, to do, to right. But instead, she has the profession venturing down the alley, right? And so, what do we think about alleys, right? Narrow, dark, dank, where criminal types hang out, right? Where there's nefarious or illegal activity, right? And so she's referencing state sanctioned violence, right? So she has um, predefined um, execution, right? The death penalty as state sanctioned violence. Okay. She continues. Last year, we heard of a local firm's contract with ICE, the government agency known for systemic due process violations and other unethical behavior. I guess we're just supposed to accept that that's true. Um, Now, my guess is that any governmental agency, or maybe more broadly, or more, well, I don't know if it's more broadly, more narrowly speaking, any police agency, there's probably been unethical behavior, right? I mean, I think what you find out in life is that wherever there are people, the chances go way up that there's unethical behavior, right? Um, Now, systemic due process violations, I don't know what that means. Um, it's possible that it references this idea that um, you can only arrest somebody if you have a warrant for their arrest. And I mean, it's absolutely true that there are times that a warrant is needed when um, police are able to put together enough evidence to suggest that a particular individual is most likely responsible for a criminal act. They get a warrant to go arrest that person. However, if a police officer witnesses a criminal act, right, with his own eyes, he doesn't have to go get a warrant and then come back and arrest the person. He can't arrest upon himself witnessing a criminal act. So here's the thing. If it's a criminal act to enter the country illegally, and uh, we just suggest that's kind of the definition of illegal act, then every minute of every day, that person who did so is committing a crime by being here. And so when ICE agent or whomever, whatever authorized agent has the identity of a known illegal entrant to the country, he can arrest that person on site. That's how I would interpret it. Now, I'm no expert, but that makes sense to me. So I'm not sure that Kelsey hasn't just bought into a prevailing narrative, a prevailing, in particular, a prevailing anti-ICE narrative. Right. She continues, I will give the architecture firm the benefit of the doubt that it only agreed to update an administrative, not detention building, but it is questionable to enter into a contract with an organization that is actively lying on record and violently violating due process rights of citizens and non-citizens alike. Okay. Um, I might say it's questionable to make these broad assertions just based on what seems to be a popular narrative without specifics. Now, is it possible that um, there have been violations of due process rights? Sure. Maybe unknowingly or knowingly. I mean, it's mistakes happen, right? Somebody's identified as not a citizen and they are in fact a citizen. Okay, we got to get that figured out. It is questionable to enter into a contract with an organization that is actively lying on record and violently violating due process rights of citizens and non-citizens alike. Okay, that violently violating, we'd have to know, what do you mean by that, right? But here's something I'll say about that. Okay, I think there's a certain nobility to um, in a person's career and their business interactions to thinking about and trying to consistently apply a standard, right? A standard um, of what at what level you want your business interactions to take place, right? And so I would hope that if she's going to hold this standard, right, that she doesn't want to enter into contracts with any organization that is actively lying on record, right? Let's just stop there. Okay. Or, well, let's say lying on record or engaging in some violent behavior, right? I think that would be noble if she said that's going to be a standard that I want to maintain. Okay. Well, if she were here, I would say, well, I'm glad to hear that because that helps me to know that you're not going to engage in any contracts with Planned Parenthood, right? I don't actually think that's the case. Now, maybe it is. Maybe she holds as a strongly negative view towards Planned Parenthood as she does apparently the death penalty, right? I I mean, I think you could perhaps draw a correlation between, well, I mean, in both cases, a person is being put to death, right? The question is, well, is there actual justification, authorization for either one of those death penalties, right? All right. So she's bothered by this, but she's willing to give this particular architecture firm the benefit of the doubt here. Kind of like a they know not what they do kind of thing. All right, next paragraph. More concerning to me is the disturbing decision made by Texas-based, I didn't mean to cross it out, Elevatus Architecture alongside Utah's Oakland Construction to design a firing squad execution facility for the state of Idaho. This is disturbing. This is a disturbing decision. Now, um, what is it that would make it a disturbing decision? Is she, you know, generally for the death penalty? She's just opposed to this type of death penalty, right? I mean, that would be a possibility. Like, um, an architect saying, I understand the need for the death penalty and I support it generally, but I don't support firing squad. I support, whatever. Um, that's a possibility, but we have to take her in her context here, right? From the opening paragraph, we saw that whatever architecture firm she was referring to initially, and now we know, Elevatus, that architecture company was venturing down the alley of state sanctioned violence. All right. So she, I don't hesitate at all to classify her as an opponent of the death penalty. Now, as Christians, we might think, well, am I, what am I supposed to think about the death penalty? Uh, should I be opposed to the death penalty as a Christian? And I'm sure that there are well-intentioned Christians that would say, yeah, we should be. Well, what I would direct you to is Genesis chapter 9. This is right after the end of the flood, and Noah and his family are leaving the ark. And what I would say to you is that at that moment, every people group, every nation, every ethnicity, however you want to describe it, every one of them that will ever exist, every one of them that exists today on the face of the earth are represented in this moment in Noah, his wife, and his sons and their wives. Every single one. There's not one single tribe of people, ethnicity, people group, nation that has ever lived on this earth that does not trace itself back to Noah and his three sons. And so, um, in that moment, all the peoples that will ever be on the earth are represented, and God speaks to them, right? Just like in the garden, God spoke to Adam and Eve, and Eve, Adam in particular, represented the entire human race. And so, what God spoke to Adam becomes an expectation, you could say, a mandate that is obligatory to all mankind. Well, here I would say we have a mandate that is obligatory to all the different nations, the ethnicities, the people groups that will ever be. And among other things, what God says in Genesis 9:6 is, whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. Okay. And this is often referred to as, well, I guess you could say, the death penalty mandate. John Gill, in his commentary, says, he that is guilty of willful murder shall surely be put to death by the order of the civil magistrate. Okay, that's death penalty, right? By witnesses, the judges shall condemn him to death. That is, the fact being clearly proved by witnesses. The judges shall condemn him to death. That is, the fact being clearly proved by witnesses, the judge shall pass the sentence of death upon him and execute it. For this is but the law of retaliation, a just and equitable one. Blood for blood, life for life. Okay, and that's how um, John Gill, in part, speaks about this verse. Now, let me just preemptorily say that this verse doesn't say, whoever shed man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, unless it becomes too expensive to do so. Doesn't say whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, unless, of course, the statistics bear out that it's not a deterrent to similar crimes. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. Unless a majority of the population feels unsettled about this, and then let's not do it. There's no caveat here. There's no condition given um, that says, okay, there can be a reason not to do this. At least in this verse here. Now, it may be that when we get into more particularly the law of Moses, that there could be, there would be, let's say, a manslaughter circumstance where an accidental death, a person is responsible accidentally for a death, and the death penalty is not called for. Okay, but just generally speaking, you commit murder, you face the death penalty, and the reason, at least in this verse, the reason that is given is, for in the image of God made he man. It's because God's image has been destroyed. Okay, now I say that preemptorily because we're gonna encounter some traditional anti-death penalty arguments here. Okay, architecture at its best simultaneously embodies and nurtures our collective values. Hmm. I think there's truth to that statement. Yeah. I mean, if you look at architecture through history, right? Look at modern buildings. Um, they're like big blocks. There are very few modern buildings that are like very interesting in their architecture. They're pretty much I'm not in commercial buildings. I mean, you residential houses, that's maybe another matter. I mean, it's the much smaller scale, but you get to the commercial type buildings and um very blockish. And it hasn't always been that way. I mean, you even look at contemporary churches and very um architecturally uninspiring by and large. And there's exceptions to that, and that's cool. But when you go back in history, and I mean, you look at architecture in Europe, medieval architecture, these structures are stunning pieces of work. They are art architecture, art architecture. I mean, they're just stunning, and it's not from what I understand, it's not that we don't build buildings like that today. It's that we can't. We don't have the know-how. We don't have the knowledge. We don't have the ability, the workmanship to build those kind of buildings anymore. Now, if you need to build a block, a square building, we can do that. Um, I feel like architecture today is like I was in grade school in art class when you were supposed to make something with clay. And the best I could do is make a snake. Like, there's other students that are making bowls and cups and plates and a vase, and I make a snake. Like, um, that's what I feel like has happened in modern architecture. And so I don't disagree here that architecture embodies and nurtures our collective values. And you look at modern architecture, and that's pretty well matching with our collective values. We're blockish, we're blockheads. Continuing on. At its most basic, it shelters human life. It is not meant to be an instrument of death. It is not meant to be an instrument of death. Okay. Now, okay, sure. I mean, buildings shouldn't kill people, right? But now we're building a facility within which execution is going to happen. So I don't know that that qualifies the building itself as an instrument of death. Now, it says here the American Institute of Architects recently amended its professional code of ethics to explicitly state this by barring its members from designing execution chambers. All right. I mean, it's an institute, it's an association, right? It has membership. I guess they can make their code of ethics. That's fine, fine. But just just because the American Institute of Architects makes some declaration doesn't mean that's the truth of the matter, right? It is easy to try and brush this off as just another government building. However, Worth Rises, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that advocates against the over-commercialization of the criminal legal system. Okay, so um, does this work? They're nonpartisan, but they have a partisan position, right? They advocate against the over-commercialization of the criminal legal system. Is that now? I suppose partisan in its original is being of a particular party, political party, is it? Let's see. Webster's 1828, partisan, an adherent to a party or faction. Right. Well, I don't know. It seems to me like Worth Rises adheres to a party or faction. They adhere to that party or faction that is against the over commercialization of the criminal legal system. So I'm not sure they get to be called a nonpartisan nonprofit organization. It seems to me like they're very partisan. Anyway, and frankly, I didn't know that this was an issue. I mean, maybe it is an issue. Um, a lot of things are over commercialized, right? Christmas. Recently published correspondence from the request for proposal that Elevatus in Oakland submitted to secure the contract with Idaho. Oh, they recently published correspondence. Okay. I guess there's a link there. We're not going to deal with that. All right. The details are grotesque. That's a strong word. And I have no doubt the few snippets of emails shared are barely the cusp of all the coordination that it will take to pull off its construction. Okay, so I mean, all the coordination that it will take to pull off its construction, is that a bad thing? That there's need for coordination? I mean, like if an architect firm is takes on a contract to build not an execution chamber, suddenly, need for coordination and such disappear. I'm not sure what she means by the details are grotesque. I have no idea what that means. I guess I'm supposed to click on that link and read through the snippets of emails that are, I don't know, taken out of context. Maybe I don't know. All right. This is Kelsey now speaking of herself, come from a family of proud tradesmen and construction workers. Well, good. My dad and uncles will proudly point out the buildings they have worked on that have helped shape this state: homes, schools, your favorite grocery store, a place of worship. For this reason, the thought of construction workers being asked to build a room where another human will be strapped down and shot makes my stomach turn. It forces them into a moral territory no job should require. Okay. Um, I think people should be free to do or not do a particular job for moral reason. There are moral reasons, right? This sentence, or these two sentences right here, what if Kelsey were to read that in an opinion about an architect firm that contracted to build the next Planned Parenthood building, right? I mean, those two sentences could exactly apply to a Planned Parenthood building. They could exactly apply to an addition to a hospital where abortions are going to take place, or assisted suicide, right? Now, to this point, she's not really um, basing her argument on any actual facts here. This is a pure emotional appeal at this point. She's doing her best to magnify the perceived horrors of an execution chamber, and say that's a reason why it's or architect firms should not accept these contracts. A plumber installing a floor drain should consider how the pipe will prevent flooding, manage rainwater, or plumbing failures, not how it will help clean up what was once a human life. Now, Kelsey, I would seem that Kelsey's intent on imposing her particular morality on these workers. I mean, if she encounters a plumber who decides, um, no, I'm okay with that. I don't have any moral qualms about this. What is Kelsey's response? Is she vilify the plumber that does do the work? In her world, are you allowed to exist if you have a differing view here? See, she's asserting that there are those things that the plumber should consider, and there are those things that the plumber should not have to consider. And she identifies what those things are. I would think what the plumber probably regularly considers is the work site a safe place for me to do my job? It's probably what he considers. State leaders have tried to shroud the reality of this proposal by insisting executions by firing squad are instantaneous and therefore more humane, but that claim collapses under even minimal inspection. Okay. So notice she characterized this as, state leaders are in the business of hiding the truth, maybe. Um, let's see what she comes up with. For example, the recent execution of Brad Sigmund in South Carolina paints a far grimmer picture. Reports describe the hood placed over his head, the visible rise and fall of his chest after the shots were fired, and the counseling services offered to witnesses after it was all over. If this process were truly humane, such measures would not be necessary. Such measures. Is she saying that it wouldn't be necessary to place a hood over his head? I'm not sure what measures are involved here in the visible rise and fall of his chest. Now, the counseling service is offered to witnesses. I don't know. If there is a death by execution that is humane, I wouldn't be shocked at all that counseling services are offered, right? I mean, I suppose the most humane death is the death of the person that has lived a long life and passes away from natural causes. And yet I'm sure that counseling services are made available to those who suffer the loss of a loved one that way. I don't know that that's the difference between humane and not humane. Okay, so I guess that's the minimal inspection. The um, Brad Sigmund, I think, was the March 7, 2025, um, execution by firing squad. That's the minimal inspection that causes the claim of instantaneous execution by firing squad to collapse. This this is not justice. So this I is that death penalty execution? Is she including that whole thing? Does she just mean um, death by firing squad? Is it just that one? It is state sanctioned homicide. dressed up as a procedure. State sanctioned homicide. State sanctioned murder of a human. Um, Back to Genesis 9:6. Uh, no, you can't classify this as murder. When it's when it is a um, judgment carried out against a rightfully convicted person, it is not murder, it is judgment. And so she's just wrong. It is not state sanctioned homicide. In fact, um, in his comments on verse 6, John Gill goes on to write this: God, as it is thought, reserving the right and power to himself before, in which for some reasons he thought fit not to make use of it, of in the case of Cain, whom he only banished and suffered not others to take away his life, but now enacts a law requiring judges to punish murder with death, and which, according to this law, ought never to go unpunished or have a lesser punishment inflicted for it. The reason follows. And that's where he takes the end of that verse, for in the image of God made he man. Right. So there's kind of two obligations that are placed upon judges here. Um, the person guilty of murder, the punishment that is required is death. And at the same time, it's required that um, it ought never to go unpunished. Okay, so she makes these assertions here without, I mean, she's got no supporting evidence for this. These are just unsupported assertions. This is not justice. This, I'm going to take it to mean the death penalty itself is not justice. Clear contradiction of Scripture. I mean, Genesis 9:6, God set this down as justice. And you might think, well, that's Old Testament. Come on, man. Well, fine. Um, we can go to the New Testament, Romans 13. He, the ruler, is a minister of God for your good. But if you do that which is evil, be afraid, for he bears not the sword in vain. Okay. Now, why would you bear a sword? To tickle? To tease? The sword is an instrument of death, right? For he is the minister of God and avenger to execute wrath upon him that does evil. I mean, we have it repeated. Genesis 9:6 is repeated here, essentially. Rulers are to carry out the death penalty when appropriate. So she's just wrong here. She goes on, that reality should give pause not only to architects, but to every citizen whose tax dollars and labor will be implicated. Wow. This is guilt. I mean, she's attaching guilt by long association here, right? I mean, I'm sure that some of her tax dollars are used in a way that's quite contrary. Well, we know they are, right? I mean, contrary to her view here. Um, all right. Beyond the moral cost, um, I guess what we just read here was illustrating the moral cost, I guess, up to this point. The financial argument is equally damning for Idaho. It is well documented that the death penalty costs taxpayers significantly more than sentencing someone to life in prison without parole. Lengthy appeals, specialized legal proceedings, and heightened security all add up. Now we are being asked to absorb an additional expense. What the Idaho legislature thought would cost $750,000 has already ballooned to 1.3 million and growing. At a time when schools are underfunded, healthcare systems are strained, and housing is increasingly unaffordable, this is a grave misuse of public funds. I'm going to make an assertion here. I'm sure there will be those that would argue it, disagree with it. But when you read the Bible, the central charge given to the civil government is that it is to punish the evildoer. And sometimes that punishment is to be the death penalty. Genesis 9:6. A grave misuse of public funds would be public funds that are used for things that are not within the proper jurisdiction of the civil government. For example, schools or healthcare systems or housing. Everything she listed here, schools, healthcare systems, housing. I mean, we don't think this way today because our whole lives and maybe the whole lives of our parents and our maybe even our grandparents has been a governmental system that actually does fund those things. And it's just become that's what government does. It teaches us, it heals us, and it gives us shelter. um, Biblically, um, those are, well, therefore I say to you, don't be anxious for your life, what you will eat or drink, or for your body, what you shall put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than raiment, clothing? Behold the fowls of the air, they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much better than they? So, what's the admonition here? Who are we to rely upon for these basic necessities? The state? He goes on, don't be anxious. What shall we eat? What shall we drink? What shall we be clothed? Your heavenly Father knows that you have need of all these things. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and these things will be added to you. Um, but you see, Kelsey's okay with the grave misuse of public funds for schools, for healthcare system, for housing, so that Everybody's attention is diverted to this man-run organ institution as the one who is able to provide all things. I would say to Kelsey, you are precisely wrong. The grave misuse of public funds is all of these things. The proper use of public funds is what's being done. She goes on, I now navigate an almost Orwellian professional landscape, tarnished by the work of colleagues in my profession. As I do, I will hold on to the memories of my dad's pride in his work and the long discussions with professors and classmates about how our profession can inspire the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Well, I'm glad they're having those discussions, and I hope that they do. I don't wish anybody ill health or being unsafe or not having provision, right? And if there's a way in which architecture and the buildings and the efficiency of those buildings and such can promote these things, great. She continues, I wonder out loud to the many people in our local government, Elevatus Architecture, Oakland Construction, what are you telling yourself as we flush out this building, how this building will function and your part in it? I think she means flesh out, but whatever. Um, I'm familiar with the long, dull list of code requirements that any building needs to abide by before it's approved. And that's kind of a weird, I don't see how that sentence fits here. But is that all we standing and aspiring architects are doing now? Checking off boxes, putting people in boxes? Look, no architect, no construction worker, no cement layer, no plumber, no drain maker who works on this facility is responsible for putting anybody in a box because of that work. I can't speak to everything they do in their life, but because of working on this facility, they have no responsibility here. They chose to take on a particular project. Their responsibility is that they do the work correctly so that it doesn't fail, right? The plumber's he's going to have an accountability if for some reason the plumbing installed somehow fails in the building, right? The architects are going to have accountability if somehow their design is flawed and the building develops cracks, becomes unstable, worst of all, it collapses, right? But they have no accountability whatsoever for whatever public executions the state of Idaho deems necessary to carry out to do its function of punishing the evildoers. Kelsey concludes, the state has already mistakenly answered the question of whether or not we can legally construct a firing squad, which begs a new one. Does she mean firing squad facility here? Which begs a new one. Should we build it? The answer, morally, financially, and ethically, is no. By the way, the rightness or wrongness of a thing should never, ever be determined by financial cost. If a thing is right to do, it doesn't matter how expensive it is. It's still right to do. Okay, so to me, that's a nonsensical argument. It's a meaningless argument. I'm pretty sure, well, maybe not. I mean, I would like to think that Kelsey would not, be in a situation where she's thinking about, well, on a particular project or something, and she's thinking, man, should I tell the truth about what's going on here? And she thinks, well, if I tell the truth, that's just going to be way too expensive. So, no. I mean, I hope she wouldn't think that, right? I hope that she would think she's reviewing some architectural design and she sees a flaw, right? Maybe it's her supervisor. She doesn't want to get in trouble with the supervisor. She's worried about holding her own position by bringing to light this flaw, and she comes to find out that it was an intentional decision to cut costs and win the contract or whatever the case, and she's concerned about the reliability or the structural stability because of and clearly the right thing to do, if there's legitimate concern of that way, I would say the right thing to do is to bring it to the attention of whomever, right? You'd probably start within your own company and bring it to the attention and say, we need to correct this. There needs to be a correction to this design here. Right? I would like to think she brought it to her boss, who signs off on the design and points it out and says, "We need to correct this. This is bad." And he says, "No, it's just going to be too expensive to make that correction now. Let's just leave it and hope that it." I would like to think she would look at him and say, "What? Expense doesn't matter at this point. This is potentially dangerous, right? The collapse or something. The cost isn't what the point is. It's saving lives." And so, on the one hand, yeah, that's great that Kelsey is thinking, right? She's thinking about, I say she, I assume it's, yeah, oh, yeah, she is graduate. Okay. She's thinking about the implications of the contracts that she takes on. I think that's wonderful. I think it's wonderful that she's thinking about what standards do I want to have and in this regard. And I'm not insisting that she has my standards. Okay. Um, right? But I think that's great that she wants to have standards by which she determines contracts to accept and not to accept. But I am going to say without question, she is spot on wrong in this evaluation, right? And I would argue that which she calls unrighteous, using the terms a grave misuse of public funds, is actually righteous. It is the proper use of public funds. And that which she calls righteous, which she considers to be the proper use of public funds, schools, healthcare systems, housing, is actually unrighteous use of public funds. Okay, that's my evaluation of that editorial. I thought it was pretty interesting editorial, pretty interesting subject. I mean, broadly, the subject of um, should we have standards that we abide by in determining what, if any, contracts we accept? And I would say yes. In fact, I would say that even though I disagree with her standard here, her decision, the outcome here, I would say fundamentally the concept is strong that businesses do have the right to make decisions about whether to do or not do a job that is requested of them based on those standards that they hold. Like, I don't know, um, who you make wedding cakes for, who you make donuts for, right? Who you hire. I think those, I think which the, so I think at the core, absolutely, everybody should have the privilege of exercising their moral standards and making determinations about who they will or will not enter into contracts with. and they shouldn't be penalized. I mean, I'm not suggesting that if Kelsey has an architecture firm and the state comes to her and says, "We need you to design this facility," and she said no, I'm not suggesting she should be punished in any way. I'm fine with that. Absolutely. Say no. That's fine. And in fact, if you want to say no and be very vocal about your reasons for saying no, fine. Express them, right? I think that's, I don't know. I think that's kind of freedom, right? Uh, Freedom that people can live and work and enjoy the fruit of their labor in concert with their conscience, you know, given we're all walking in the boundaries of that which is generally legal and ethical, right? All right. Um, let's talk Greenland for just a little bit. I mean, that's the whole Venezuelan thing happened, and now Greenland is ratcheted up. And what's really going on there? Well, I think there might be some clues that can help us to know what's going on there. Uh, Now, interestingly, here's an article from January 13, 2026. Danish intel, and that's Denmark's intel, warned last year about Russian and Chinese military goals toward Greenland and Arctic. Right, the sub-headline says Denmark's politicians are downplaying Trump's claims of Russian and Chinese threats to Greenland, but Danish intelligence warned about Russia and China in stark terms. So, that would seem to support, undergird Trump's claims of why Greenland is strategically important. While Denmark's leaders downplay the threat to Greenland posed by Russia and China, Denmark's Danish Defense Intelligence Service recently released an assessment bluntly warning of Russian and Chinese military ambitions toward and expansion around Greenland and the Arctic. Okay. So Trump said that the U.S. needs Greenland from the standpoint of national security. He argued that the frozen autonomous territory owned by Denmark was covered with Russian and Chinese ships. Top Danish foreign policy and defense officials quickly sought to push back on Trump's claims, right? And so it seems to me, I mean, I haven't followed this really closely, but kind of my sense is that, it's this that gets the play in national media that, well, Trump's making these wild claims and Denmark is saying that's not the case. And yet, a recently released assessment apparently warned of that which Trump is warning about. It says here the Intelligence Outlook 2025 report on the security of the Kingdom of Denmark, released just last month, had warned at great length that China is preparing for a military presence in the Arctic and that China's long-term Arctic interests include Greenland. The report highlighted Chinese air-based seaborne and submersible activities in the Arctic. Okay, well, um, I don't know. That sounds like Trump's concern is on point. Now, I guess the report could be misguided or something, but it's I guess you at least have to say that, well, what Trump is saying he's concerned about is validated by allegedly reliable intelligence reports. And reliable intelligence reports, not just from any Yahoo out there, but from Denmark itself, who owns Greenland. All right. So that's interesting. Now, this article here, um, a new Arctic's a new Arctic survey's mask war prep warns top U.S. general. Well, what does that mean? I don't know. It says the Arctic is going to be one of the world's most critical strategic locations for the next century. What's perhaps more important is the strategic locations found therein. Whoever controls the Arctic holds a great big hammer over the heads of every person in the Northern Hemisphere. Russia, China, and the United States are the three main powers contending for control of the Arctic. A quick look at a map is revealing. Notice what it says here. Russia already holds almost half of the Arctic Ocean's shoreline. Here's the map. And apparently these red dots represent Russian outposts, maybe, I guess you would call it. Do you think Trump's concern is misguided, misplaced? I don't know. It's really interesting that within this government, at least, apparently the worst guy on the planet right now, except for Donald Trump, is Vladimir Putin. If this is true, this map here, if this is true, uh, shouldn't everybody in our government be on board with Trump? You're absolutely right, President. Um, we need to do something. Russia has a lot of control there, and that concerns us because Putin bad. Now, I think there's another factor here that doesn't get talked about as much. Um, I think there are those in the United States who are very attracted to Greenland as a location for what's called an AI data center hub. I guess this is a super large AI data center. And Greenland is attractive because its frigid climate drastically reduces energy use. Um, the way in which energy can be generated there, I think particularly hydropower, um, its location is considered a strategic mid-Atlantic location for low latency transatlantic data routes. And then the lack of environmental and community pushback, right? There wouldn't be the using up of community water for cooling and such. See, I think that's a big driver of why the United States, Trump wants Greenland because of the possibility that it would put the United States at the forefront of the AI war. Because if they could do this and then quickly build this large hub, it would be the first, I think, the first of these so-called um, uh, data center hubs that would be built. And when you have guys like Bill Gates, Peter Thiel, Bezos, maybe Musk, already have shown interest in this. Um, Thiel, in particular, who's a big funder of JD Vance, funder of Donald Trump. I'm sure they're expecting reciprocal action, right? I mean, they've scratched politicians back. They're expecting to get a scratch back. So I think that I'm not discounting the security angle. I think the AI is a real possibility, could be a real major factor in why Greenland is so interesting. All right. Let me just do one last thing here. This is from Arctotherium on X. And he says this in 2022, 45% of high schoolers polled say they were taught that America is built on stolen land in class at school. And another 22% heard it from an adult there. Um, so apparently, what he's posting here are um, uh, graphs suggesting the exposure to critical social justice concepts in high school. And this is as recent as 2022, apparently. So the blue is saying, yeah, this concept was taught in class. The lighter blue is, I heard it from an adult at school. The gray is neither, and then the don't know category. So, it seems to me like you'd put the blue and the light blue together as um, the number or the percentage that were influenced by this critical social justice concept. America is a systemically racist country. Between being actually taught and adults spreading that, um, 62%. In America, white people have white privilege, 66%. Although I might have to agree with that. Yeah, white people have white privilege, black people have black privilege, right? I mean, what kind of privilege would white people have if it wasn't white privilege? In America, white people have unconscious biases that negatively affect non-white people, 57%. America is built on stolen land, 67%. Now, you know that that's just fallacious, right? Um, the Native American and American Indian um, did not have really, did not, I shouldn't say really, they did not have a concept of ownership of land. They didn't understand private property. Okay. Um, but you read a good history of the establishment of the colonies, and almost without fail, you read about um, the colonists purchasing the land from the Indians who had no concept of land ownership. And so, from a legal standpoint, I don't think there was any requirement for the colonists who arrived to pay anything for the land because there was no actual ownership of it. But I think in almost every case, they honored the principles of ownership and they purchased the land from, you know, the the tribe. But if you bring that up and then oh well, yeah, but the Indians didn't understand the concept of trade. Yes, they did. You can't tell me that in their culture they didn't trade things, right? You can't tell me that one Indian did not make a bow and another Indian had made moccasins and they made a trade. They understood trade. I'm sure they did. I mean, trade is just basic to human nature. You have something that I desire. I try to figure out what I have that you might desire more so I can trade for what I desire. That's Gender is an identity choice regardless of the biological sex you were born into. 51%. I'm glad that's as low as it is, but that's still. Students taught all of the critical social justice concepts were in fact more likely to agree with them. Among those taught America is built on stolen land, 73% agreed. Been taught the concept in question. right? So this is just simply saying that students who are taught a concept are more likely to agree with it. I don't think that surprises me. Okay? It does emphasize the importance of what are the concepts that we are teaching. Among those students taught five critical social justice concepts, 75% believed whites are responsible for the inferior social position of black people, and 44% support preferential hiring and promotion of blacks. So, um, favor preferential hiring and promotion of black people right here. This is great, 44%. 75% white Americans are ultimately responsible for the inferior social position of black people. And so if you're white like me, you need to think about what is it that you've done in your life that has held down black people. You need to do something about that. White guilt is a function of CRT related classroom exposure. I feel guilty about the social inequalities between white and black Americans. Number of CRT related concepts taught in school, right? So the more of these critical race theory concepts are taught, the more guilty a person is made to feel, a white person is made to feel, right? So the 16-year-old white kid, what has he done? What has he done to promote the social inequality between white and black Americans? I think if you rounded up every 16-year-old white kid in the country, you'd come up with probably zero that have literally done anything to bring about the social inequality between white and black Americans. And it would be irrespective of being taught critical race theory or not, right? I mean, they're consumed with not looking awkward at the school dance, right? Taking care of that pimple so it doesn't show up, avoiding the bully at school, right? Members of all races felt less comfortable with criticizing a black classmate with more CSG concepts taught in school. Frankly, this is one of the issues that plagues us is our unwillingness, and therefore it's now become our inability to actually be properly critical of others. It's not always wrong in a situation to say to a student, no, that's a bad answer. You should do better than that. Let's see, we don't want to push students to higher performance. We just want to make sure that they never feel bad. And so when they come up with 15 for 5 plus 4, we say, well, that's a really good try. I can see how you might think that. Oh, yeah, good for trying. When in reality, it may well have been that was just a lame effort. You're not paying attention at all to what you're doing. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. I'll let you know that I mean this is a post by uh Ac Arc Arctotherium on X. You can search it out and read through the whole of his post there. Um, the one thing I didn't get to tonight, I had this article here that most of us still don't understand the true darkness of Barack Obama. Maybe we'll try to save that for next week. Hey, thanks for watching the video, being a part, and appreciate your comments. Correct me where I'm wrong, because I'm sure I'm wrong somewhere. But I hope this was like an interesting journey just through some random news items. Um, and I hope it serves as an example. I mean, I'm not perfect about this, but it just serves as an example as making an effort to try to read through an article and think from scripture to that article. Okay. Um, yeah, so join us again next week, another random cast. But join us throughout the week. Monday night, History Done Right. Tuesday, Lantern's Quest. Wednesday, the midweek study. Friday, random cast. We'll be, Lord willing, doing them all again next week. And so please join us. Please like, subscribe, share. And like I said, you don't have to share the whole video. We can understand that people don't. I've gone for over an hour 20 minutes here. Okay, I get it. You don't want to spend an hour 20 minutes, but there's something that we talked about along the way here, right? Share the video at that point. You can do that in the share. You can pick that you want it to start here and share the video and let the person know, hey, just listen for the 5 minutes that I've marked here. Just listen to that, and you might get the answer you were looking for. This is really interesting, give you something new to think about. And that can be a way to get people's attention and draw them into what we're doing. All right. You have a good night, good weekend. And if you're able to, join us live Monday evening for another live stream. That would be History Done Right. We hope you join us for our other live streams. Have a good night.